afternoon. Welcome to West Texas A&M University's 4th International Business Seminar. And we have invited two distinguished speakers, Consul General of Germany from Houston, Mr. Burkhard Ranft, and a gentleman representing German Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Jacquemetton. I hope I pronounced their names correctly. It's pretty difficult, especially French names. Anyway, I won't waste any time because we don't have too much time. This seminar will be for 45 minutes. And at this time, I would like to invite Dr. Jerry Miller, Pickens College of Business Dean, to invite these speakers and introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anwar. This is indeed a good program, and we have great attendance, and so I am very much appreciative for all of you in attendance. I, too, have been working on these names a little bit, and this is with Burkhard Ranft, who is in Houston now. He's been here 2 years, and he had been in Bonn in Germany for prior to coming to Houston and Texas, and of course we're thrilled that he's here. But he's served all over the world and has been in Africa probably more than any other service that he's had. And we were just talking a little bit about Africa and how that experience has been and what his hope is about that. And if he wants to talk about that a little bit, we certainly would honor that. But let's give a warm welcome to Burkhard. Our speaker for today, Anwar has already introduced him, and so I'm just going to say Jacquemetton, and maybe I screwed up that last end, the French part of that. But at any rate, he is in Dallas, and he serves as a lawyer and is pretty much doing international business kind of transactions. The thing that I want to say about him is that not only did he get his JD degree from George Washington University, but he studied political science and German down at Emory University. And I have a son that is an employee of Emory and have a very fond opinion of that school, and he does as well. He had Jimmy Carter as a professor, and he said Jimmy was an outstanding teacher. And after visiting with him a little bit, I'm just convinced that he's going to be an outstanding speaker on how to do business in Germany. So let's give a warm welcome to Chief.
Sehr verehrte Damen und Herren, ich begrüße Sie recht herzlich und bedanke mich zugleich bei den Initiatoren für die eröffnete Möglichkeit, als Vertreter der deutsch-amerikanischen Handelskammer zu Ihnen zu sprechen. I don't suppose anybody really understood what I just said.
We did.
I wanted to start this speech on a good note, on the German note, especially because of the fact that my name is Jacquemetton, and I am a dual national. I was born and raised in France, in Lyon, and I realize it's a little awkward to have a Frenchman speak about doing business in Germany, but I'm the product of close relations between Germany and France, which started after the Second World War. I attended a school, bilingual school, that was set up by a program set up by Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer, whereby we had two professors in each class, one French, one German. And over the course of my career, I've built on that, and I've traveled, and I've been a member of Parliament. I've been an intern in the German Parliament, and also working in the German Ministry of Labor. So on that note, I want to talk to you today about doing business in Germany, and much of what I'm going to say will apply to doing business almost anywhere else. Really, when you're trying to do business internationally, you have to obviously prepare yourself. You have to do your due diligence, and really, it's not much different from doing business anywhere else in this country, for example. The only difference is that the risks and rewards are magnified, and there are risks that really are very important to take into consideration, and some of them there's really not much you can do about. To give you an example, my family in France is in the import and export of textiles, and when the French government in 1981 was elected, a socialist became president. And within 2 years, the president devaluated the French franc 3 times. Now, when they devaluate a currency, they don't give you advance notice. They just, one day, they make an announcement and they say, well, your currency is worth 8% less. And so these are kind of risks that you need to anticipate when you're trying to do business abroad. But really, doing business internationally itself hasn't changed since the beginning of commerce. In fact, when you think about it, noblemen in the Middle Ages traveling from one country to another would need letters of introduction, letters of credit. They would need to retain attorneys if they were going to do a contract in another country, and they would probably need an interpreter if they didn't speak the language. Those same things are necessary nowadays, although we have certain conventions and treaties that facilitate these exchanges. And I'm thinking here of the United Nations Convention on the International Sale of Goods as a good example. Now, why is developing a relationship with your business abroad, business partner abroad, so important? Well, you've got unforeseen problems. You've got communication errors and differences of opinion. All these you're going to need to resolve amicably if your relationship is to develop, blossom, and eventually bear fruit. I'll give you a good example of that, and this is a true story from one of my colleagues. A German company contracted with an American company to manufacture and distribute its product in the United States. Now, each company was a large company. They all retained a bunch of lawyers, and they hammered out a contract which gave the rights to the American company to manufacture and distribute its product throughout North America. About a year later, the American company finds out that the German company is in talks with the Mexican company to manufacture its product there and distribute its goods there. Now, the first thing the American companies did was they called up the German company and said, hey, you're in breach of our contract. And, well, what was the whole dispute about? Well, the whole dispute is about the term North America, which is something you would never think about. And even though we lawyers like to draft 50-page documents with 15 pages of definitions, this is one definition they overlook. In English, the term North America really encompasses Mexico, United States, Canada, and we take this for granted. In German, Nordamerika really signifies the United States and Canada. In fact, if you look in the German dictionary, the Duden, and you look under the word Mexico, the definition for Mexico is a country in Central America. And that was the whole dispute. And now, this sounds, petty and in some instances, but it was a legitimate gripe for both parties. They each thought something was different. Well, how did they resolve the dispute? Well, they had to talk to one another. They had to decide what was best for both parties, because if they were going into a litigation, really this would have been a protracted battle in one country or another. It would have cost thousands of dollars, and at the end, the relationship would have been broken. So it was best to resolve that dispute amicably, and in order to do that internationally, you have to develop ties on a personal level. Now, how do you do that? Well, first of all, when you travel abroad, you have to approach the whole process with an open mind. You have to be objective. Sometimes you have to be self-critical or introspective. You have to be adaptable. You have to be self-confident, and you have to be thick-skinned. Because whatever you do, there'll be problems, faux pas, unanticipated circumstances along the way. I'll give you a personal example. When I worked in the German Parliament, after a few months, I had a German girlfriend. And of course, everybody in the office was real interested in knowing exactly what this was all about. Well, after a weekend where I had met my girlfriend's family, well, the people in the office kind of ganged up on me and said, well, tell us about him. So I said, in German, I said, die Familie had 3 Tochter. And everybody started laughing. And, I didn't know what I had said. And so I was kind of embarrassed, and everybody just couldn't stop laughing. So after a couple of minutes, one of the secretaries says, well, the plural for daughter, Tochter, in German is not regular. The plural for daughter is Tochter. And what you just said is the family has 3 tarts. So you have to be able to laugh these things off and take it in stride. But I think, in my experience, what most of us don't realize is that we're all human beings. We've all been raised in a particular culture and environment, and that it affects the way we view life, we view business, and interact socially. Now, political and economic social systems vary greatly from one country to another. Part of it is based on history, religion, even some people attribute this to weather. And it's an issue that continues to be debated today. Nevertheless, you need to address this, and you need to be able to deal with it. So I'm just going to give you a few facts about Germany to try to put this into perspective. Germany is about half the size of Texas, but it has 81 million inhabitants. Texas has about 17 million. I don't know if you can picture yourself in Germany, but if you were in Amarillo, pick a city, you'd be maybe in Aachen in Germany, which is Aix-la-Chapelle in French. But picture yourself being in the same city, but with 10 times more population. Instead of being a city of 180,000 people, all of a sudden you're in a city of 1.8 million people. And every other city in Texas mushroomed 10 times. So you'd be wall-to-wall people here in Texas. You'd have 170 million people living in Texas. So that affects the way Germans interact with one another and the way they view life and business in general. Now, put on top of that the fact that Germany is basically surrounded by 9 different countries. You've got the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Poland, and Denmark. All these countries border Germany. Now, can you imagine cutting Texas in half and putting foreign countries surrounding Texas? If you're in Aachen, you're basically maybe 30 miles from France, maybe 50 miles from Luxembourg, 70 miles from Belgium, 100 miles from the Netherlands, maybe 150 miles from Switzerland. Now, I may not be getting all these things right, but because my geography, and having not lived in Aachen, I can't tell you exactly what the distance is, but to think of it, if you're driving an hour, you could be in 3 different countries with 3 different currencies, speaking 3 different languages with 3 different political systems. In fact, when you think about it, Germany, for one in every 3 workers in Germany works directly for export. As a percentage of the gross national product, Germans export more than any other country in the world. So Germans are pretty much used to doing this. In fact, most people in business in Germany speak at least one foreign language, and that language will be either Russian, French, or English. So Germans in general are much better prepared to do business internationally than we are. I'll just glance over the political system, and I'll be glad to answer more questions. But basically, Germany is a parliamentary democracy. It's a federal system. It has 16 states. It has a Bundestag, which is the House of Representatives, a Bundesrat, which is a Senate. And the main difference with the Senate in Germany is that the senators aren't elected directly by the people, but are representatives of each state. Now, put on top of that the European Union, which has its own structure, including a commission, which is made up of representatives of each different country. It has rotating presidencies. Every 6 months, representatives from one country run the commission and the commission's agenda for 6 months. There's a European Parliament, and there's a European Court of Justice. Now, the legal system is also different. You've got a civil code, which in this country is alien. We're used to common law, which is decisional law from one court, and which will have binding effect on another court. In Germany, the German civil code basically tells you everything you need to know about your rights in a particular area. The roles of judges and attorneys is totally different. Judges, for example, in Germany are allowed to ask questions, which here does not happen. Here, judges are basically referees. The lawyers do all the work. In Germany, the judge will ask questions, has the ability to appoint experts to look into a matter. And the whole system of litigation is totally different. For example, if you're a plaintiff, you have to prove your entire case. And if one element of your case is not there, you lose. And if you lose the suit, you have to pay the defendant's attorney's fees, which is much different from this country. And really, the whole approach to litigation is different, and that has a big impact on business. For example, you can't really get insurance to cover punitive damages in Europe. Why? Because punitive damages don't exist. So for German companies that manufacture products to be sent to the U.S., one of the biggest worries is how are we going to deal with litigation in this country? Because the exposure is so much broader than it would be in their own country. Now, to me, the most important aspect of doing business internationally is to be able to develop those relationships. Because I've seen so many instances where really the law is not going to help you. And the only way you can resolve your problems is through negotiation. Now, I've brought with me a book today by an Englishman. His name is Richard D. Lewis, and it's entitled When Cultures Collide, Managing Successfully Across Cultures. Now in it, Mr. Lewis speaks of different cultures, different countries, and there's a chapter on Germany and a chapter on the United States. And I thought that it would be an eye-opener to read a few passages from this book and give you an impression of what someone thinks of Germans and of Americans, so that you can put that into perspective when you want to do business abroad and in Germany. Now, I've got some leave-behind copies of my speech, which also have the entire chapter on Germany and the entire chapter on the United States. So, with your indulgence, I'll read a few passages. Germans have their own particular style of conducting meetings and negotiations, and you may find those procedures with big German companies are much more formalized than in your own country. It is generally advisable to adopt a rather more formal approach with Germans at meetings and to note the following German characteristics to which one must react appropriately. Germans will arrive at the meeting well dressed and with a disciplined appearance. You must match this. They will observe hierarchical seating and order of speaking. They will arrive well informed as to the business and expect you to be also. They do not concede their case or arguments easily, but tend to look for common ground. This is often your best approach to make progress. They believe they are more efficient, gründlich, than others and do not change position easily. They compartmentalize their arguments, each member speaking about his or her specialty. They expect your side to do the same. They are willing to make decisions within meetings, unlike the Japanese or the French, but they are always cautious. They generally stick to what they have agreed orally. If you're selling to them, they will question you aggressively on what are German strong points, e.g. quality of goods, delivery dates, and competitive price. Be ready. They expect in the end to get the very best, meaning lowest price. They may only give you a little trial business, even at that. Take it. It will lead to much more business later if they are satisfied. Now, I think just by reading these bullets from this book, you can see that although Germans aren't really much different than Americans, they do approach things in a different fashion. Now, interestingly, Mr. Lewis, when he writes the chapter about Americans, he devotes a whole subchapter entitled How to Deal with Americans. And I have to tell you that a lot of this is pretty much true. And you know, people will look at you that way when you go abroad. American business people have the reputation of being the toughest in the world, but they are in many respects the easiest to deal with. That is because their business philosophy is uncomplicated. Their aim is to make as much money as they can, as quickly as they can, using hard work, speed, opportunism, power, the power also of money itself, as the means towards this end. Northern Europeans are well placed to deal with Americans successfully. Their reputation as straightforward managers is well received by the open, frank Americans, who often get seriously irritated by what they see as the devious manners of Latins and Orientals. At meetings, Americans show the following tendencies. They are individualistic. They like to go it alone without checking with the head office. Anything goes unless it has been restricted. They introduce informality immediately, take their jackets off, use first names, discuss personal details, including family. They put their cards on the table right from the start, then proceed on an offer and counter-offer basis. They often have difficulty when the other side doesn't reveal what they want. They want yes in principle and will work out the details later, but they can be very tough in the details and check on everything in spite of apparent trust. Germans, French, and others prefer to settle details first. They don't like lulls or silence during negotiations. They are used to making up their mind fast. They're quick on the draw. They regard negotiating as problem solving through give and take based on respective strength. They do not appreciate that the other side may have only one position. I don't know how much you've taken from my reading these passages on Germans and Americans, but suffice it to say, people approach things totally differently. And if you're negotiating a deal or developing a business relationship, you're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to be able to adapt to the business situation and develop a bond, trust with your business partner. Because, as I've stated, there are a lot of unforeseen circumstances that crop up. Now, as an attorney, most attorneys like to think that they can resolve everything and they can draft a contract that is bulletproof. Well, that's not true. And attorneys differ, and I'm sure I'll pick quite a few fights with a lot of people. But I find that really, if you use professionals judiciously to help you do your due diligence, to help make sure that you see all the pitfalls in the road, that's the best time to use an attorney or anyone else. Because once you've picked a fight internationally, I can tell you there are almost only losers. I hope this has been helpful to you. And once again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
We open this floor for your questions. For Consul Ranft or Jacquemetton? Yes, sir.
Dr. Anwar, Charles Starnes, both a student here and also instructor at the university, as well as ehemalig marine attaché to Verenigd Staten Bond. So, herzlich willkommen, and these are Tischland. So it reminds me a lot of my time near the northern land of Germany on the North Sea, where the land is very flat also. My question has to do with a conference that was done in Berlin in September of 1994 that was put together by Ambassador Holbrook, where he brought many American business leaders together with German business leaders and politicians in association with the departure of the Allied troops from Berlin. And the purpose of the conference was to forge the partnerships necessary to help enhance German-American business relations, as well as bringing in the business opportunities of Eastern Germany. For Herr Consul General Ranft, do you see an increase or an improvement in German-American business relationships, especially as we see the development of the former East in its modernization?
Yes, I thank you very much to have the opportunity to address you a few words, and you gave me one point. Everybody knows that Germany is a federal state. It's composed of 16 Länder, states, and they are German states, but they are quite different. And these differences are still with these Länder which formed former German Democratic Republic before the reunification. And there is, I think you have to look at it in a different way. Doing business in Germany differs if you are doing business in the western part or in the eastern part. The eastern part, that means the part what has been formerly German Democratic Republic. The people, they still speak German, okay, but they have been raised for 40 years in a different way, in a socialist planned economic society where individualism wasn't so much developed. When the Germans were reunified, we thought it would be very easy to do business with the Eastern part. First of all, we had to realize that the economy was at a level like zero. And that could be a chance too. And so we invited also the American businessmen to look into the economic landscape, to get investments there. But as you've heard, Americans like to make the money a little bit in another time frame than we are used to. So that means a quick money. And if you have for you an economy on a level zero, you can imagine there is no quick money to make. So that was the first obstacle, I think, to overcome. And then the second one is we have in Europe and in Germany too not a very free economic market. That the market is regulated, especially as it is the energy sector concerned. And several American investors refused to get into the German market, these branches, until the regulations were dismissed or replaced by more liberalism. I think that's a second obstacle, but they are working on it. And I think we will have good chances that the American investors should go there. I think don't think I will be wrong to make a few remarks on. There are American companies like Enron in Houston who's dealing with this affair, and others more. I don't want to name others. So these two obstacles they have to overcome, and I think we are on the right way. I will leave it by these few remarks, and if you need some more, ask me more. I will try to get a more intensified answer for that. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Und diesen Freitag feiern wir zusammen Ihre Deutsche Einheitstag. Okay. German Unity Day from
Yes, everybody knows, or everybody does know, I don't know. The 3rd of October, there is our German National Day in remembrance of the unification.
Any other questions? Cindy?
To what extent? What are the languages one would need to know to do business in Germany?
Okay, first of all, German. But I think you don't have any problems because everybody who has been in school knows English. But that's a basic. And if he is still a businessman and he had some university studies, he knows English fluently. So the Americans won't have any problems with communications.
I'd like to address that a little bit myself, show you the difference between Germans and French, for example. Everybody knows that when you go to France and you try to speak French people aren't very nice to you. And I tell you, part of it is because they're not very nice to themselves. You know, having gone to school in France as a child, they really beat the language into you, literally. And so French people are very particular when it comes to pronunciation and effort in speaking French. But I have to tell you that my experience in Germany is that if you try to speak German, people are very open and very happy with you and your effort. And it's worth learning German and to utilize it, even if it's just to break the ice and eventually conduct your negotiations in English. I think you'll earn a lot of respect for doing that.
I would like to ask a question about the European Monetary Union, and I understand that Great Britain has just announced that they are going to participate in that when it comes to France. Can you, there's a lot of uncertainty here as to how that's going to happen. Can you comment on that and what you see as the future of that, the currency transaction?
Would you question to the rest of us with regards here?
The question is about the European Monetary Union, which is going to happen on January 1st, 1999. And what are the prospects, because there is some sort of anxiety in this country?
Basically, really, a lot of the integration process in Europe, including of currencies, has already taken place. Really, the particular date, 1999, has not that much meaning when it comes to business, because for, I don't know exactly how many years, but at least 10 years, there's been the ECU, whereas it's not something you can put your hands on. It's a basket of currencies made up from all the different members, and each country is allowed to fluctuate a certain rate, plus or minus 2 to 4.5%, maybe 6%, depending on whether the Italians have truffle or not. But basically, this unit of currency has been in use in business for a long time already. We have bonds that are issued in ECU denominations. Central banks use it to make exchanges. You've got public offerings in ECUs. Really, the big difference here is that it'll affect the average person on the street. And you know, I think to me it's a good effect, because you know, if you're in France and you're trying to figure out how many marks to the French franc, well, I know it's about 3.4 francs to the mark. Well, then all of a sudden, if you go to England, which is an hour's train ride away, then you got to figure out how many francs to the pound, and that's totally different. Same thing if if you go into any country, and I think that goes back to the point I tried to make, is envision yourself, every time you drive 100 miles in one direction, being almost in a different country with a different currency. I think that has the biggest meaning of 1999, but other than that, the system has already been in place, at least for business, and really I don't expect that it will be that much of a sea change.
Any other questions? David?
What is the level of business education at university level in Germany? Are there business colleges of business inside universities, or how's it considered?
Yes, of course. There are also business schools, like they are here in the States. But the traditional education in business is not so much the university study, but that's the dual vocational training. That means you do business by doing, you learn business by doing business. You are trained on the job, and then 2 days a week you are attending school, special vocational training schools. But this is one part, and the other part is, in fact, also real university study in economics, business. We have Volkswirtschaft, we have Betriebswirtschaft, marketing, everything you could do here in the States, you can study also in Germany. Perhaps you have some remarks on that?
Really, if you're looking at business internationally, I think every country is growing closer to one another. And the interesting thing about international business is that really you have to learn another language, and you have to have some kind of a degree, but a lot of the degrees nowadays issued even in other countries such as Germany might have even the same titles. You can get an MBA in Germany, and you study different processes, but the theory might be the same. Different countries are particularly good in business in a certain part of business. Americans are great at marketing. Americans can sell a product, but the Germans can build a product. And so, the emphasis in school might be on your particular country's strengths.
Well, we are running out of time. I just wanted to make a few announcements. These sort of seminars, basically it's a collection of all the efforts. I just want to recognize few companies which made this thing happen today. Our sponsors for today's seminar are Southwest Airlines and of course Amarillo Gear. I have 3 gentlemen here and they donated money for the luncheon. Tony Sample, International Sales, Tony. Mr. Steve Chilupka, Director Marketing, Amarillo Gear. And Mr. Glenn McCain, President, Amarillo Gear. And I also want to recognize some other organizations which are very helpful to us and they cooperated in this. Of course, Pickens College of Business, Department of Management Marketing, Syed, Students in Free Enterprise, Phi Beta Delta, Honor Society. These are both award-winning chapters in this region. And my grad assistant Paul, he's busy over there in that room. He has been very helpful, Kim, and all the students from Syed, and of course JB Horton. Dan Driver is outside. He's one of our bouncers today. And all these people made this thing happen. Now, if you RSVP for our luncheon, it will be served downstairs in room 11. So again, on behalf of WT, Dr. Miller, Dr. Long, Dr. Killebrew, we want to thank Consul Ranft and Jacquemetton for their wonderful comments, and we hope to have you again soon in the next coming years. Thank you again for coming, and goodbye.